to my dungeon.
Welcome to Cauldron's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Cauldron. If you're new to the show, we use our combined 30 years of experience to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the Krypt at cauldronskrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, we're going to explore a very complex subject, BDSM and marriage. But first, I have to welcome my amazing co-host, Fun Size. Hello, Fun Size.
Hello, Master Cauldron.
How are you today?
Kind of bouncy and just bubbly and in a good mood. How are you?
I just hit a fit of hysterical laughter, and I'm thinking it's probably going to continue throughout this, so this might just be a very interesting episode on a couple of different levels besides just the content.
I'm sure our listeners are used to your hysteria by now, so that'll be okay.
I would hope so. All right, well, let's hit these rules to love by and then dive into this. It is something serious. It's something that I've received a lot of questions about. I know you have as well, so it'll be fun and exciting, yet educational. So, rules to love by. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. That's KNKI from the KNKI app, available on all platforms. That stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And rule number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young. Submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. All right, so normally at this point in getting into the beginnings of the topic, I'm looking for a definition, but yeah, I don't quite see that as a thing with BDSM and marriage, because we should all know at this stage in our life, if you're listening to this, hopefully you're over 18. If you're not, stop the podcast now and wait until you are. But we should know what BDSM and marriage is. So I will skip for my usual, or I will skip my usual request of definitions and get into, I guess, some of the more complex topics involving this.
I think that's a good idea.
So I know several things come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
What's one of the first things that you think of, or maybe that you've experienced? I know I've got my own list.
Well, the first thing that pops into my mind is jealousy, the great big green beast that none of us like to acknowledge, but all of us have run-ins with occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter the dynamic of your marriage, jealousy can and more than likely will arise at some point. So you just have to be ready for it. And if your partner or you are poly, it's more likely to pop up just because you're going to have the NRE, the new relationship energy, anytime you bring somebody new into that relationship.
And that's one place that I find it interesting, because a lot of people think, oh, well, this is going to solve all of our problems. We'll just learn about poly, and they kind of brush over the jealousy part because, well, that's not going to happen to us because, well, we've agreed to see other people.
When we hit the religious complexities of this, I'm gonna share a little piece on, we're not going to experience this just because we've agreed to it.
Yeah.
So we'll get there. But when it comes to jealousy, it's important to discuss with your spouse if one or both of you has become jealous. Communication can help you find the source of the jealousy and work together on alleviating the situation. This is very true. Back when you and I attempted our DS relationship, I've told this story before, that my husband came to me and said, hey, you're kind of neglecting me and I'm getting a little bit jealous on the emotional side of things. It happens. Talk it out, because sometimes it will be as simple as that, or your partner maybe feels like they're brushed aside, or you feel like you're not getting the attention you need. It's really important to communicate these things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that is just simple, cut and dry when it comes to communication. In talking about BDSM and marriage, this is going to be one of those I wish I had a nickel kind of conversations when it comes to communication, because it's just something that we can't stress enough.
Yeah.
But the sources of some of these jealousies, I guess, would be something to talk about. the attention, not getting enough attention, or feeling that in some cases it's not even that you're not getting enough attention, but the other person is just getting too much. The general stress that any new relationship can create, worrying over creating emotional bonds, especially if it's more of a swinger style open marriage than a poly relationship, and having a frequent sex partner. And that's all it's supposed to be, but yet repeated sexual activity with a single person is going to create emotional bonds. And there's often jealousies over that. Any other sources that you can think of that help, or issues that create that jealousy?
I would say just general stress can lead to that. You can become stressed in the workplace or with everyday life. If you're juggling, a career and family and your BDSM lifestyle, you can definitely become overstressed, and it can wear on you as a person to the point where you're starting to feel insecure and you're not taking time for your relationship that you used to be able to. And that in itself can stir feelings of jealousy. So it's just important to watch out for those things.
I think disrespect will not only create anger, but will create jealousy. Because if you've got a person that has done something that is viewed, whether or not it was actually disrespectful, but if it was viewed as such by the, I'll say primary or the spouse in this scenario, and you take the other person's side, well, they didn't mean it that way. Well, they didn't, and you defend that additional partner, that's going to lead to the spouse thinking that, well, you're just taking their side, and that's going to lead to some jealousies as well. But how do you feel about that?
I think it's important, and I've watched this happen amongst poly families before, where there wasn't necessarily a cut and dry line between the primary and the second or third person, but there was definitely disrespect going back and forth. And no matter what the person who had brought in the second or third did, they would always be blamed, no matter whose side they took, because in that way it was creating this line of tension and this cut and dry of, oh, this side, that side. And the truth is, it shouldn't be any sides, because disrespect shouldn't be part of it ever. You should be able to talk to your spouse, talk to your paramour, talk to whoever it is, and be respectful and be able to communicate at all times. And I think that's true not only in BDSM, but throughout our lives. We should be able to treat others with respect all the time. But beyond disrespect, if you see a third person in the relationship or yourself snipping at your spouse or any of those situations, it's a sign of jealousy. It's rude and can actually become abusive. And honestly, who wants to live in that kind of discord and household? You want to make these relationships not only survive, but thrive. So it's important to discuss the incident and set the boundary of respect and communication, which is actually our next point.
Yes, and as we've said already, this is the single most important thing in any relationship, and communication, we just cannot undersell it here enough. It's the foundation of any relationship should be communication. I remember my teenage years, my early 20s, and unfortunately, even now in my 40s, oh, dear God, seeing people get together and their entire relationship is based on sex. And all of the communication that they have is about sex or what's for dinner. And then when there's no sex after dinner, then there's nothing in the relationship. And yes, sex is an important part of every intimate relationship of this type that we're talking about, but it's that day-to-day communication and that deep communication that will only happen every so often. I know when it comes to check-ins and talking to some of my vanilla friends, I've actually got them participating in check-ins.
Same.
Yeah. And it's something that I know you and I have discussed here on the Krypt before. But as far as the topic here goes, BDSM and marriage, what are the specific points that you feel need to be included in this one?
I would say that if you're already part of the lifestyle when you get married, your partner should already know. If you've gone down the aisle and you've skipped this huge part of your life, you probably should not have gone down the aisle yet.
Ouch.
But
that one applies to me.
Yeah, and you know what? I bet your dear lovely wife is going to be listening to this, and she's going to look at you and she's going to nod and go, "Yeah, fun size was right."
There's no question about that.
Yeah, so
it would have changed everything and made the first several years of our marriage completely different and way more impactful, way more intimate. And out of all the things, the deep, dark, dirty secrets that I shared with her, this was the one thing that I intentionally failed to mention because I didn't know how she would respond. And that should have told me that either I tell her and, she responds appropriately and is able to be okay with it, or she was not the person for me. And as it goes, as it went, she was able to find out about it through communication and accepted it and actually participates in it, as everyone knows now. So, but I did it wrong, completely wrong. And it's one of the few things in my life that if I could go back and do it over, I most certainly would. But she was so incredibly awesome that I was willing to give it up, or to try to give up the lifestyle to be with her, which is being fake to who I really was inside. I just didn't realize it at the time that it was, I knew it was important, but I didn't realize that it was not just something that was important in my life. It was something that makes me who I am. And I guess it's just part of being young and stupid or naive. Some would call it naive. I would just call it, in my case, stupid. But anyway, going on into these divisions between getting into it before marriage and making it a part of your life after you're married.
Well, if you're getting into it after you're married, it's important to discuss your growing interests and needs with your spouse. There are quite a few people out there who are actually hiding their BDSM lifestyle from their spouse, and every single person I know who is experiencing the same two things. First, they are sure that it would end their marriage if their partner found out. And second, they live with the gut-wrenching guilt and fear over what they are doing. Not a pleasant way to live, folks. It's really not. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, there again from experience, I can comp to that. It is not a pleasant way to live.
I was just about to ask you about that.
The thing is when you're hiding it, even if you're not participating, you're not being active with it, you just feel empty. And when you are participating in it, then you're cheating. And anytime you're not being honest with your spouse, that's cheating. People want to, well, you were making out with somebody or you were having sex with somebody, blah, blah, blah. Oh, no. There are many more forms of cheating. This emotional disrespect and being closed off and not sharing, that's often more volatile in a relationship than a blatant act of disrespect. And at this point, it becomes that when you're participating in these things and you're not sharing with your spouse. If it's who you are and you can't share with the person that you're with, then, that should tell you something about yourself, them, and the relationship.
As far as the whole cheating thing goes, there are quite a few that use online play as their format for scenes. And they go, well, we're never physically in the same place. They don't even have my phone number. It's only on online chats and stuff, so it doesn't count. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Let me correct that. Yes, it does. It absolutely counts. If you went and talked to your partner about it, I'm sure they would say it counted too. It's like the whole, it doesn't count if it's in a different zip code rule that we grew up hearing. That's nonsense. It still counts.
Yeah, that was just for the movies.
Yeah, that was just for the movies and really dumb college kids at the time.
Yeah. That online aspect of it is just as damaging. You can become, especially, and guys, listen to what we're saying here. From a man's standpoint, it doesn't matter that much, because when we're doing this, we know what we're doing, supposedly. So it's not going to matter that much to us. And we think, well, it's online, so she shouldn't care. But you're sharing. She'll care, and she'll care because as these relationship and as this play goes, you're becoming more intimate and more emotional. And these are things that you should be doing with her or him, your partner. So don't let it fool you. And then also put yourself in their shoes. What would you be thinking if you found out that they were spending an hour to 40 hours a week with someone online? Yeah, you'd blow up. Or in most cases, people would blow up. So really just don't do it's bad. It's bad. And if your relationship isn't strong enough to be able to open up and talk about these things and to share about it, then there again, maybe it's not the right relationship, or maybe it's something that you're just living in too big of fear for whatever reason. And we can get into this under the religion section, but you've got so much guilt that you're applying way more pressure on yourself than what your spouse will. So, all right. Here's a fun topic. If one person in the relationship is in the lifestyle, and we've kind of been talking about this a little bit, but it flows nicely, does the vanilla partner know? If your spouse does know, but isn't interested in participating in the kink community or scene, they can still be a support system. And I think that's, and some people will play it, out of sight, out of mind, or just don't bring it into her home. But I know you and I both know several people that are kinky, that have vanilla partners, but they still end up going to munches with them or participating somehow in mild things. But when it comes to play, that's where they respectfully bow out and say, have fun. I'm going home. There's a photographer here in Knoxville he's an amazing photographer. And a lot of what he does is within the kink community, but he is actually very vanilla, and his wife is leader of a couple of different groups and has been for 20 years locally. And if I'm not mistaken, she has been an educator, a traveling educator as well. But he'll constantly say, no, I'm vanilla, but he's, going to munches and doing some of this photography. And he does a lot of vanilla photography as well. But we kid with him and, no, you're photography is just your kink. You love photographing that. He's like, no, I'm not really. It really doesn't do anything for me. But through his photos, you can actually see his passion. But anyway, he's just a big supporter. And there's a lot of people like that. And it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation because you get their side of it as well.
I actually had a vanilla friend just this last week, and she was looking at dating someone that's part of the community here, and she had heard about that, and of course she knows about me. And we were having this conversation sitting on her bed, and she looked at me and she goes, can I handle the things that are going to come up? I said, you'll be able to handle parts. You may not dive deep into it, but you probably surprise yourself with what you can handle and what you can't. And she just goes, okay, if I have questions, I'll come to you. And it was just such a wonderfully communicative and supportive attitude to have that I just have to shout out for people like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think anytime we have a chance to learn and grow, and even if it's something that we're not going to participate in, it's completely fascinating. That's one of the most common things that I hear from a lot of vanilla people that are still somehow associated with the kink community is it fascinates them.
Yeah.
And that could sound like, well, they're looking at us and like we're some kind of freaks and getting their kicks by laughing at us. But no, these are I've not really met any that were disrespectful or anything like that, because they're there to support their spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or, whatever. So going back to communication and combining it with one person being in the lifestyle and the other not, remembering to communicate and negotiate what is acceptable in your kink. Say you're a dominant and part of somebody that you're playing with's aftercare is cuddling, but if that's not okay, say if my wife drew a limit there and said, I don't mind you playing with other people. I don't mind you having sex with other people. But when it comes to like cuddling and the more intimate side of things, that's a hard limit. Then I would have to find someone to proxy for that type of thing. How do you feel about that? Or what kind of insight do you have on that?
I think that's actually where a good portion of the non-sexual players come from, is that they have a spouse or a partner who has drawn the line that, yes, you can participate in BDSM, but it will not include sex of any kind.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to take that perspective and to remember that, okay, you may come across someone that's married and they may not have an open marriage, but it doesn't mean that they can't have a kink lifestyle.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't if that's what your spouse says. You can definitely have these things and keep your marriage strong at the same time.
Mhm. And on that, not an open marriage, I know people where they certainly, hang on, waiting on the lawnmower to go back by. I know people that they certainly don't have an open marriage, but sex in a scene is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, it's, and people think that sex in scenes, it's weird. The preconceived notions that people have about that, I consider it to be just strange. Well, that can only occur in medical play or in primal or, spanking during impact play, and you just happen to, slip it in.
There should not be any oops slipping in.
Well, I don't mean like,
Oh, I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But it can happen in all kinds of scenes. But I know some people that where, no, you can't just call somebody up and have a hookup. But if you're scening with somebody and that's where it takes you, then that's okay. I don't know, rules so complicate things sometimes, but we need to have them and then look at them frequently to see where we still stand with them, because just because something was true yesterday doesn't mean that it's true today. But the only way that we're going to know if it's not true today is if we sit down and talk about it. There again, communication. Of course, ideally, I think for most people, if they're into to BDSM and kink, then they're going to want their spouse involved as well most of the time. So if both are in, let's address that.
Okay. So it kind of breaks down into two categories. There are those that scene together, and then there are those that scene apart. Myself and my husband are those who scene apart. So we have to have very clear boundaries. And then there are those that scene together. They might live the lifestyle 24/7, or it might be a case of something that only happens in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those who have it as the Christian discipline lifestyle as well. So you really have these things where you have to break down what's going to work for you, what's going to work for your marriage, and still communicate and be respectful at all times. What are your insights as far as your marriage is concerned?
Well, that's where it gets interesting.
I know there's some rules that I've heard from your marriage where it's not exactly 50-50 mirror balanced on each side, but it seems to be working for you. So,
yes, that could be said, but that's the way that it does work for us. Now, as I said, when I started the show, she was kind of vanilla with sprinkles, and the sprinkles happened only in our bedroom. As things have progressed, she has shown an interest in learning certain implements, and so I've taken her under my wing and started mentoring her, and she's a pretty good pupil. More practice, always more practice. But we actually seen together last weekend. We co-topped someone, and yeah, so things are so ever evolving and changing. So it started out with just me and an open marriage, a one-sided open marriage, because she has no desire to go outside of the marriage for anything. I have no desire to go outside of the marriage for anything emotional, and she understands that. It's not at all an issue. And I'm not obviously, as you can see or hear, it is very complex, and I've gone into a lot of detail throughout different episodes. But what I guess I'm kind of stumped right now, because we are currently in a major change in things. So it's really hard to define. Yeah. So the complexity is just crazy. It really is. But it's fun. It's good. It's healthy because we are talking about things. We're doing that communication. And that is actually right now we're in a place where it's not just taking place on a weekly basis, but it's rapidly changing. So daily communication is very important. And I mean deep daily communication to discuss the change. So I don't really think I've added too much value or content there other than to say that it's complex and it's in fluctuation. So under the bus you go. What is it with yours?
All right, so as far as being thrown under the bus here, just like your relationship with your lovely wife, we are currently fluctuating. There was an incident that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, followed by another incident, which made things even more complex. But we're trying to find our balance of where we were even 3 months ago as an open marriage, while at the same time trying to create a family. Which is actually our next complexity, is having a family. And when we say family, we, of course, don't mean, oh, you have brothers and sisters. No, we mean you're going to have your children in the house, which is something a lot of people also have to experience in this lifestyle, is rearing a family while also being their own kinky selves. Do you have any thoughts on having a family?
Don't do it. No, I'm just kidding.
Now, look here, Master Cauldron. I happen to know for a fact that for most of your life, you very much wished to have a family.
Yeah.
So don't throw that "don't do it" dour thing out at our listeners.
Well, as you said, it's adding complexity to complexity. I think that's a very simple way to state it. But as far as a healthy family goes, viewing that family dynamic in the vanilla setting and talking about communication and stepping it up to that next level where it is so prized in the BDSM lifestyle, it can really add to teaching children how to approach everyday life and relationships. If communication had been prevalent in my childhood, I'd be a totally different person. But my family, as I've talked about before, was so incredibly closed off that nothing was allowed to be talked about. So I would go out and find things out for myself. I do not condone being friends with your children, but sitting down and having real conversations with them, that is parenting. Of course, all of my education on this is based on what not to do that I learned from my parents and textbooks and psychology and these things. So, of course, if you don't like what I'm saying, then just throw it away. That's fine. We can agree to disagree. No problem there. But from what I have seen personally, people who are in the lifestyle that have children, their children are not afraid to communicate. They're not afraid of their feelings and emotions. And despite what a lot of people, not just men, but people think, we are emotional creatures and there's nothing wrong with being in tune with those. And having a child that is not afraid to come and ask you questions about any topic, that's when you know that you're a good parent, in my opinion. And again, I'll throw that disclaimer. It's my opinion. And that's just on the topic of the communication between parents and children and what I've seen. When it comes to handling BDSM between spouses that have children, I talked to an amazing couple yesterday. I will call them J and S. I did a phone call with them, and they have no problem with it, with the kink side of it in the bedroom. The happy fun time is certainly happy fun time, but when it comes to managing a DS relationship with their 2-year-old and then other children, a child from previous marriages, they find it very difficult to settle into their preferred roles and finding the balance there and each of them stepping up and forcing themselves through repetition to jump back into these roles. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that you can definitely have children and have your lifestyle. It's all about finding a balance that works for all parties involved. And I'm not gonna lie, looking at the future for me and my spouse, as far as us procreating goes, there are some concerns that have arisen for both of us as far as balancing who we are, me being a switch and being a dominant, along with rearing a child. So the fears are there, and I'm sure it'll come up over the next several years as we keep doing this podcast and as I get to experience for myself this amazing journey of motherhood. Yeah, these fears are there, so I think it's natural. I think it is.
Yeah, and the fun part with that is when your child is of age and they start listening and going back and hitting the back catalog.
There will be some discussion before they are of that age to listen. Now, look here, little one. You are not to pay any mind to Uncle Cauldron's flirting with Mommy on the show. No, I think at a certain age, an appropriate age, not only should you discuss things of the birds and the bees nature, but if you're part of this lifestyle, also don't go into the details. You don't need to do that, but you can go into the psychology of it, of some people like to submit, some people like to dominate, and just take it as a natural approach to life.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be something that your child is going to be into for themselves, but it is something that they can understand at a certain point of age and maturity.
Yeah, children always learn their reactions from
Their parents.
those that they're around. So however you react to a situation, however you feel about something, if something is taboo, and hopefully if you're in this lifestyle, you don't consider it taboo, which, well, I know some people.
Unless that's your kink.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. I know some people that do because they get off on the taboo of it. And that's fine. I do too in some certain specific little areas that I will choose not to share here. Oh, come on. I have to keep a secret every now and then. But
okay.
Yeah, your reaction to it is going to teach them how to react to things. One of the most fascinating things for me as a teenager and already becoming interested in psychology was meeting my friends' parents, because I would see why they were how they were. Somebody who was extremely anxious and handled every situation as though it was the end of the world, and meeting their parents and finding out that their parents lived in a constant state of stress, anxiety, and basically damnation, that everything was an emergency. And then other friends whose parents just, whatever. It is what it is. We're going to deal with it. They never really got excited about anything unless it was a true emergency. And when it was a true emergency, they handled it appropriately. They didn't panic. They didn't freak out. And that's how my friend that had them as parents handled things. So that's one of the most important parts of that puzzle to me, is be intentional with those actions and reactions. And then when it comes time, just like you said, you can further this information and education. And I know a lot of people with children in the lifestyle, in fact, most people in the lifestyle that I know have children. And most have handled it beautifully. And of course, there's been those few accidents where things happen, just like any time somebody walked in on mommy and daddy doing sit-ups, as I heard.
Or hugging in the dark.
Yes.
That's what I heard. Hugging in the dark.
Hugging in the dark. Oh, we're doing sit-ups. Oh, well, you
Sure.
are awfully sweaty, but I don't know why you're doing them naked and straddling and... But yeah, I mean, there can be those awkward moments, but it goes without saying, I guess. Okay, so moving on into I hate to say one of the most important parts of this, because it is all so incredibly important, but one of the things that you are inevitably going to experience, and I'm kind of having a feeling this is where you're going to share those two events that come up. I don't know. We haven't discussed this, but unexpected landmines popping up or crossing these mines, and poof, there comes explosions. When you get married, you agree to stand beside someone as you both learn, you grow together, and you become that one person. And I'm not making light of it. I just find that expression funny. But part of that is things that we don't expect to pop up. So some good, some bad things are going to take place. In BDSM, these minds may require a spouse's support or be caused by that spouse. So how you handle these situations can either remake or completely break your marriage. Fun size?
I'm going to take yours as a transition and jump into the hottest point of religious beliefs about marriage and BDSM, and that is adultery. This is something that happens for a lot of couples. Many of us grew up with the notion that any relationship outside of marriage was bad, and a sexual relationship was adultery. You may have consented to a polyamorous marriage, but the feeling of betrayal can still pop up. And this is where the incident happened, the first one. So I grew up in the South. I am a Southern belle. I don't have my accent anymore, but the beliefs are still there. I attended a Southern Baptist and a Methodist church, and I still believe that if you go into a church and the pews aren't made of wood and they don't hurt your back, and all you've got for air conditioning is a little wooden fan up above your head when it's 100 degrees out that barely breezes you, that you really can't experience religion. I actually said this to Bridie Red just last weekend. I told her, if you're not in pain, you're not reaching God as far as churches go. So
wow.
I know that if that isn't a Southern belief, I don't know what is. But I definitely still have the backbone of what is right and what is wrong according to those Christian beliefs, even though I am not a Christian. And one of them is adultery, which up until recently I have been able to pass off because I either had online play or my play that was local was non-sexual. So the first time I crossed that line, I tried to pass it off as nothing, but it started to wear on my brain. And then I hit a major sub drop and burnout, and the whole thing blew up in my face. It was a very unexpected landmine. Even though my husband and I both fully consented to an open polyamorous marriage, including sexual BDSM and play, it still pops up. We weren't expecting it, neither of us, as it's never been an issue in a relationship before. But marriage changes things in ways that you don't expect. I remember when I was planning to get married, someone had told me the only thing that was going to change in my marriage was my last name. Not true.
Wow.
Yeah. Not true. If you're looking at getting married, there are things that are going to change that will be so far under the surface that it's going to take years to come out or for you to even realize they're there. So definitely pop up a warning there to anyone that goes, oh, it's just your last name changing. So much more than that. And the thing is, I felt like I needed to be punished because I felt like I needed to do something wrong. It felt like cheating and betrayal, even though it wasn't. And even though after it happened, I definitely sat down with my husband and we had a very long talk about the incident and what had happened and what we could do now to alleviate the feelings that were arising and tiptoe around the mine that had blown up around us. And one of the things we had prematurely settled on, and I say prematurely because we just had not fully expressed my feelings of needing to be punished. And so I was kind of waiting for a punishment without saying, hey, come out and punish me, because my husband and I do not participate in those kinds of things together, simply because he has that as a hard limit for himself, as far as I'm concerned. So one of the things we had prematurely settled on was to close off our relationship for the time being until we could get our feet about us. But during that time, it came to light that he had 5 separate online scenes with 5 separate people during our closed off period, which was cheating. I fully called him out on it and made my feelings about the matter known, and our marriage is still going. So even if you are a cheater, just know that you can't talk to your partner, and it does not mean that you will 100% end your relationship. Have a little faith in your relationship as far as that goes. But since then, we have reevaluated and decided to go back to an open marriage.
And how long ago was that?
Let's see, the adulterous incident, as I'm going to call it for me, even though as far as consent goes, it really wasn't. And I have to forgive myself and kind of push away those old beliefs that I do not want as part of my life, was 2, 3 months ago. I remember you calling me right after it had happened, literally moments after it had happened, and you were in the middle of a scene. I had just come from a scene, so I wasn't really in the mood for talking, and I remember that much about it, but I can't give you a specific date. And then we set the closed off period about a month after that, and we had literally just reopened our marriage a day before his cheating online had come to light. And that was about 2 weeks ago. So this is still something that we are healing from, something that we are discussing, and we are discussing my feelings of needing to be punished. But in truth, it's just that I need to forgive myself because I already have his forgiveness. He feels like he needs to be punished, but I can't do that because I already forgive him for what happened. He was stupid and it was hurtful and disrespectful, and we've discussed it. But if I punish him, it will just blow things up worse. So punishment, even in these situations, can be such a tricky minefield to handle.
And forgiveness is hard.
It's
hard to not subconsciously punish people when they have hurt us. And no offense, this is not misogynistic. It's just a fact that there's a reason for the saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Because women typically, and I'm throwing out a broad blanket here, so don't get upset with me if this doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to every woman, but women are typically more emotionally driven than men. It's just in our DNA. So that subconscious delivery of punishment can often take place unless you are pragmatically aware of the situation on a constant basis to not do it. But that really explains a lot of why burnout hit you so hard. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you can go to CauldronsCrypt.com/143 to listen to Avoiding Burnout, where Fun Size goes into a lot of detail about the burnout that she was experiencing at that time. And from what you've said just in our last episode, that's starting to subside some.
It is. And the communication between my husband and myself is definitely a huge, huge part of it starting to subside. I want to go back to what you said about subconscious punishments, because that was something that I had thought my husband's cheating incidents stemmed from. I had literally told him just before the incident came to light that I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, that even though he had said he forgave me, that I was still waiting to be punished. So I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to do something to hurt me. And of course, when this came out, I was like, okay, you got me.
Yeah.
But I mean, that really wasn't what it was. It was just him being an idiot, which he fully owns.
Oh,
He fully owns that he was just being stupid, and he doesn't really have any other reason. Stupid, he couldn't sleep, and hormones. It happens. So it's important to talk these things out. Communication has definitely been the thing that has made our marriage survive and thrive. And it's something that's going to make our marriage survive and thrive, and our BDSM lifestyle that we live together but apart survive and thrive.
Yeah.
Hopefully for the next 100 years.
When it comes to the religious aspect, that is something that I get a lot of conversation about as well from a lot of crypters, is how to balance religion and BDSM. And it's an episode that I've been promising for a long time, and we've tried to record it and come up with some issues there, and neither one of us felt as though what we had recorded would actually work. It is going to happen. That is such a difficult topic for me to discuss personally, and I know it's something that's hard for you to discuss as well when we really get into detail on that single topic, that it will come. It's just have some patience with us, and we will get that to you eventually. But personally, that is one of the most tormenting things, because it's the foundation of who I am, like it or not. I grew up in church just as you did.
Mm-hmm.
I had very similar experiences as you, and it creates just a guilt. I have a Jewish friend, and he's constantly talking about his mother putting him in a Jewish or putting the old Jewish guilt trip on him. And, and I'm like, the first time he said it, I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, oh, it's just a thing common amongst Jewish mothers that they are the masters of the guilt trip. And I'm like, well, that's awfully stereotypical to say because my Baptist, now Methodist mother, pretty good at it herself. And he's like, just wait till you get around my mom. You'll see. And I'm like, well.
My husband comes from a Catholic background, and he definitely has the Catholic guilt.
Yeah.
So I get to experience that.
I think it's any religious mother. But it growing up with that, and that is the foundation. It's some of the hardest things to overcome in my relationship with my wife. And the thing that is communicated about the most is my personal guilt with the things that I do and needing reassurance. So for everyone out there that is dominant but needs to turn to their spouse for reassurance, it's okay. We're not perfect. People have this concept in their head that is just so unrealistic of the domly dom, but I love her. I care about her more than any other person, and it is so important to me to make sure. And because of that guilt, there are times when I just don't believe her. She's saying the words, she's showing the actions that everything is okay, but it has created such a personal conflict that sometimes that guilt just comes out when it's not even justified. And then there are times when it is justified, and we deal with those situations accordingly. But when it is justified, that makes it even harder during the times when it is not. It's the struggle is real, as the kiddos say. The struggle is real. Let's get into some of the tips and tricks that we've found to balance things. Go ahead and have at it first.
Okay, so obviously communicate, ask questions.
I knew you were going to say that first.
Of course I'm going to say that first. It's so important. Ask questions and clearly negotiate the boundaries. And then don't become instantly disheartened if your vanilla partner reacts negatively towards BDSM. There is so much misinformation and so many bad apples out there ruining it for the rest of us that your vanilla partner may simply require time to process. Most often they will come back with a million questions, and it's important not to get defensive and to simply answer those questions. You know what? Let's throw this piece of advice to all relationships as far as BDSM and vanilla partners go, whether you're married or not.
Yeah.
When you introduce that person, just be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to throw out the next piece?
Well, I do, and I do because this is my house motto, which is respect above all else. And that is the thing, is always be respectful. And that's the house motto because that encompasses everything. If you have respect and you're showing respect towards someone, you're not going to lie, steal, cheat, yell at them, reduce yourself to a very immature state and start name calling or any of this garbage. So be respectful. And if you find yourself edging toward a screaming match or whatever, that's when it's time to throw your hands in the air and call a timeout and go back to your corner, and then don't come out fighting. Come out talking. One of the dumbest myths or dumbest sayings that I've heard, and people used to tell me this all the time.
Oh, I'm sure I've heard this one.
Yes, when my wife and I were talking about getting married years ago, don't go to bed angry.
Bull hockey.
Yeah, that's a bunch of crap. Some issues are way too big to handle in one evening of conversation, or 2 evenings, or 3 evenings, or a week, or a month. Some issues can take years to resolve. I highly recommend therapy if it's an issue like that, or counseling. But sometimes you're just going to have issues, and it's so important to remain respectful during that time. Now, there have been times when my wife and I have been in the midst of some very serious, just about all-out wars. But we were still able to get in the kitchen and cook supper together without acting out toward each other. And we were able to go to bed together and kiss each other goodnight or cuddle up for some happy, fun time, which, by the by, angry sex is some of the best sex. But, you know, the issue was not held with a great level of animosity and hatred. And just because you're ticked off at somebody doesn't mean you have to be a butt toward them.
Mm-hmm.
There's still life that has to be done. And I never will forget the first time that I saw this with a couple. A friend of mine sat and talked to me for hours about an issue that was going on between him and his wife. And then she come home from work, and it was just life as normal. And I was dead set that as soon as she got home, I was trying to get out of there before she got home, because I knew that it was just going to be all out war from the second she walked in the door. And the way that they handled things, and I brought it to their attention. I'm like, wait, you guys are having this issue. How are you not just blowing up at each other? Because we still have life to live. Just because we have this major thing going on doesn't change the fact that we have 2 children in the house and that we're raising them to be adults. We're not raising children, because that's where I got that saying from. You don't raise a child, you raise a little person into an adult. And you have to teach them how to handle opposition without the defiance part, and without the animosity and the constant anger, and with maturity. And it just freaking blew me away, because in my house growing up, when people were angry, it was nonstop hatred.
Mine too.
And that lasted, well, let's see, probably from the time that I was conceived until now. And I'm 41, and my parents were divorced when I was 15. And yeah, they still couldn't be in a room together without just absolutely killing each other. So learning that there's a different way to be, and that it comes down to respect, was just absolutely amazing to me. And don't forget that, you know, this is somebody that you care. Yeah, you may be mad at them, but this is somebody that you care about, that you love. So part of that is that respect. What is that quote that we say in the Rules to Love by? Submission is not about authority. Change that. Relationships, they're not about authority. They're not about obedience. It's all about relationships of love and respect. And that's why I love that quote as much as I do. All right, moving on to the next bullet point of this conversation.
The next bullet point is to offer empathy. It's important to be able to put yourself into your partner's shoes, to be able to see their perspective on issues that you maybe don't agree with, or maybe you do, but you just don't quite understand why. You can definitely take what they have to offer and take a look at it for yourself.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with that empathy is doing that without feeling offended that you may not be able to be everything to one person. And this is something that we've talked about before, is that common thought that one person can be everything to another person. If that were the case, then as soon as we met the one, then all other friendships and relationships would cease to exist.
You know what? I'm going to take a piece from 2 celebrities that are married to each other. God, what is their name? Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard. They actually came out and said that they are not the one for each other, and they don't believe in the one, because you can't be everything for everyone. And you know what? Everyone likes to emulate celebrities. Emulate those two's relationship right there. You cannot be everything for everybody, or even just for one person. And honestly, how boring would that be?
Yeah.
My husband is my husband. Cauldron's one of my work husbands. Bridie Red's my work wife. And there's all these different relationships. And they're important because they nurture different sides of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So embrace those things.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that anytime you have somebody trying to isolate you from relationships, and I'm talking straight up vanilla here.
Abuse.
My trainee, I've noticed that she was kind of isolating away from all of her vanilla friends, and she's not super comfortable with a lot of the kinky friends that we have. And she actually brought it up in a journal entry before I did. And I was about to. It was on a list that I keep of things to talk about. And I had to insist, you know what? You're isolating. And that is a sign of codependency, which is abuse. Whether it's intentional or not, it's abuse. So you need to start nurturing some of these other relationships that you had in the past or create some new ones or something. But I do not in any way want to be put in the position of being someone's only place. It's just very uncomfortable position for me, and I find it incredibly abusive, even if the other person does not, because if the other person doesn't, then that's putting the abuse in my direction, and I'm the one being abused because that means that I'm required to be your everything, and I am not anyone's everything. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. That is too much responsibility for any one person. That is putting me on a pedestal that I'm inevitably going to fall from. And when I fall from grace, it is a glorious failure. I have been placed on that pedestal many, many times, and it is, beautiful destruction is what it is. My God, please don't do that. I am just a person. So anyway, take time to calm down if you become angry or upset. I think that's pretty self-explanatory there. Just like I said, go to your corner and come out talking. Don't come out fighting. The next one that would be on that list, understand that as both of you grow as people, things are going to change and the unexpected is going to occur. I think anybody at a certain maturity level realizes that life is an ever-changing event. What do you have about this? Because this is something that we've brought up kind of here and there throughout the show about change and unexpected change.
I think it goes back to our discussion about personal growth and the journeys that we're on. And when it comes to marriage, yes, you're on a personal journey, but you have also consented to the long term, to hopefully for most of us, the rest of our lives, shouldering this journey and walking this path with somebody else. They may not always hold your hand. They may go a few feet ahead or behind or trail off on some other little trail for a little while, but they always end up coming back from their detour. You come back from your detour. And the point is that, yes, you're going to hit bumps in the road. Yes, there's going to be all these things that you don't expect, hidden attractions, roadside carnival kind of things that might pop up on your path and your journey. But the point of marriage is that you always end up back with that person. So I think it's important to say, yeah, things are going to be difficult, things are going to change, but I'm here, they're here, and to always be striving for that togetherness.
Yeah, as long as you're working together, then you're standing together. So whatever unexpected happens, it can be dealt with. So I think moving forward, being careful to watch for frenzy or burnout. I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I need to forward this to you. I haven't done this yet, but a lot of information has come back in on the frenzy and the burnout episodes, mainly thanking us for putting those out there and the information that and the personal sides of ourselves that we shared. But if one partner is experiencing either of these things, that's a very volatile time. But if both are, holy crap.
It's like a tornado on your yellow brick road of life, really.
Yeah, somebody, my pretty, is going to get... the house is going to land on somebody at some point if you're not careful, if you're not quick to recognize this and start slow playing things. And that's not just with frenzy, that's with burnout as well. People don't realize that, but as soon as that frustration comes, it needs to be brought up and you need to slow things down. I experienced a moment of burnout last night, and it's still continuing through today of there needs to be a serious change in my life right now. Talked about it before with work, and I was doing so well in getting episodes released on Saturdays and wanting to do it every Saturday. And then everything with work changed, and that affects everything in my life. And it's just got me feeling very down, very vulnerable, to be honest, and very, very burnout just at once. And it hit me like a ton of bricks last night when I pulled into my driveway from a cookout with my amazing kink family and just great friends, and everything was good times. We had some spontaneous play that took place, and I got to co-top with my kinky brother on two people, and I've missed that since my local dungeon has closed. We haven't got to do that. And then all of a sudden pulling in, it's just all these reminders of things, that the way things were before my job took this major change that is keeping me away from home more, and how I've been fighting so hard to have a change of jobs, of careers, and then I'm used to the calm before the storm and then the change after, but I can always see it. And currently, I cannot see an end to this current issue. And when I pulled into my driveway and looked at my grass that desperately needs mowed, which I'm going to do as soon as we get done here, there's that weight of the world on my shoulders and that ton of bricks, and that exhausted feeling just absolutely hammered me of, my God, how much longer am I going to be able to continue this? How long can I keep this up? And don't worry, that does not mean the end of the show by any stretch of the imagination. But unfortunately, it does mean every other week for production of episodes, with the occasional live broadcast in there and things of this nature. I'm just going to go ahead and set it that episodes will be released every other week, because I just can't. I can't do it every week. It's impossible at this point with everything that's going on. So, and that could change today or tomorrow. I just don't know. But moving on, and this is something under the same topic with frenzy and burnout, but with this, asking for support and a secondary watcher for these things from a third party person. So somebody that you trust to say, hey, you kind of in frenzy. And I think you and I, Fun Size, we're pretty good at recognizing this. And it's always easier. Well, no, I was going to say it's easier to recognize the frenzy than it is the burnout, because people tend to hide it. But in your closest friends, you know that it's coming. You know that it's going on. And not being afraid to step up and say, we need to have a talk.
Yeah.
And that goes for either person on either side of that coin. Your thoughts?
Be part of each other's support system. And this goes not only for your relationship with your spouse or your primary, but also with everyone in your life. If they're part of your support system, you should be part of theirs. It's just really important to be there for each other as much as you can.
Yeah. This is something that we've only talked about once or twice on the show, but for anybody who is needing any type of consultation, we do offer that service. Mm-hmm. Just contact us, and the couple that I mentioned earlier is a consulting, but don't be afraid to ask for some help. And even if you've got everything together and life is good, just bouncing it off of people, rates are going to vary depending on the situation. But if you are an executive producer of the show, then we can get together once a month. That's supposed to be in a group format right now because there's only a couple of executive producers. Then we just do those as monthly calls. But if that's something that you're interested in, let us know. Send us an email. We can do some one-on-one stuff that breaks down pretty simply. So we can give you some suggestions, help you out there. Just contact us.
Yeah.
And with that said, and talking about those executive producers, I very much like to give them a shout out. Jeremiah and Silas, our senior producers, Matt and Jeremy, our producers, Kane Sin, Danny and Heather, and our junior producers, K2SO, Irish Mountain Dragon, and Buffalo Dom 84. And if you would like information about that, just go to ColdernessCrypt.com, click on the support tab. You'll find the information there. Second, I'd like to thank BDSMcontracts.org for their donation of their beautiful 25-page soft and hardbound MS&DS contracts. You can find them at BDSMcontracts.org. Use the coupon code Cauldron20, that's KULDRIN20 for a 20% discount off of all purchases. And I'm out of those contracts. I've got to contact Lily and get some more. And then finally, I love April at Whipping Stripes. She is my personal maker of all things leather and paracord impact toys. Phenomenal work. Don't have a discount code for you. She doesn't pay me. I love their work. They do custom things for me. And I have to give them a shout out in every episode because of how much I love their products. Next week on the Krypt, we're going to talk about contracts and collaring. In the meantime, go to Cauldron's Krypt for the show notes, how to subscribe, sign up for our email list so you can get the show notes emailed to you when an episode drops, find links to our FetLife group and profiles and the Twitters and the Instagrams and the Facebooks and all this stuff. Just cauldronskrypt.com. Fun size, any final thoughts?
Just that I'm really looking forward to next week's episode.
I am too. That's a fun topic to talk about. It's serious, but it's not. It is a very serious thing, but it's very exciting and fun, and yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks again, everyone. And we will talk to you again in 2 weeks unless we do a live show. And join the group, because with those live shows, I always post in there that we're going live. Usually that's Saturday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And that will do it. This has been Master Cauldron and Fun Size for CauldronSkrypt.com. Unearth the truth.